They say if you sit in a chair long enough, it forgets what you weighed when you first sat down. I guess people work the same way. 28 years ago, I walked into Archwell Group with a second-hand suit, a Rolodex of supplier names, and the kind of grit that doesn't show up on paper. Today, I walked out with a cardboard box and a silence so thick you could bottle it. My name is Malcolm Rains. I'm 54 years old. Until 10:17 this morning, I was Chief Operations Officer at Archwell Group, private tech, defense-adjacent contracts, logistics development. I managed supply chains that moved faster than public knowledge, oversaw integrations that kept weapons off front pages. I don't say that with pride, just precision. That was my job, but none of that mattered today. I was mid-email, typing a note to one of our South Korean partners confirming a warehouse clearance, when the call came through, from her assistant, not her. "Claire Lang would like a word, sir. Now." I clicked save, took a breath, adjusted the cuffs on my shirt like I still had control over something. Claire sat at her father's old desk like she'd been born behind it, hair tight, eyes sharp, one leg crossed over the other in a way that said she'd already made up her mind. There was a red folder on the desk, a file I recognized but had never seen open. She didn't invite me to sit. "Malcolm," she said, and there was no warmth in it, just syllables. "You're being terminated, effective immediately." I blinked. That was it. No ramp, no bridge to the sentence, just the drop. "There's reason to believe you knowingly falsified logistical data tied to the Hankook robotics deal," she continued, like reading from a script she'd barely rehearsed. Specifically the 4B manifest from Q4. The numbers don't reconcile, and neither do the chain of custody timestamps. This violates internal audit policy and federal code under SEC compliance. Legal has advised immediate action. I didn't respond right away. I watched her eyes. She didn't look away. She also didn't look like she fully understood what she was saying. "I see," I said quietly. That was all. No denial, no protest. She wasn't here for a debate. She had the power now. And when people inherit power, they think they have to prove they know how to use it. The folder slid across the desk. Her nails didn't even chip. "You have 10 minutes to gather your things. It will escort you from the building." I nodded. "I understand." I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door, didn't even breathe heavy. I just kept moving, past the glass offices and rows of fake ferns, past faces that had laughed at my jokes 2 days ago, now conveniently buried in spreadsheets and screens. The silence followed me, thick and awkward. No one asked if it was true. No one asked if I was okay. Jules from HR avoided my eyes. She'd been in my office last Christmas crying about a miscarriage. I'd gotten her husband a job at one of our transport vendors. Today, she tightened her lips and looked down at her phone. Tom from strategy gave me a tight, polite nod. One of those, "I'm staying out of this" gestures that mean less than nothing. I reached my office. 10 minutes. I didn't need 5. Took the photo of my wife and son from the corner, the coin from Everett Lang's retirement speech, and the stainless steel pen I'd had since '98. Everything else could burn. My nameplate came off like a sticker. I slid it into the box last. On the way out, I passed the same hallway where Everett once told me, "You don't build loyalty with perks, Malcolm. You build it with war. People only follow who they bled for." I bled for this place. Hell, I tourniqueted it through 3 downturns and 2 federal audits. When the Department of Defense pulled our drone contract in 2011, I spent 72 hours in the war room with no sleep patching vendor holes and rewiring freight pathways. We didn't lose a single cent, but Everett was gone now. Claire had taken the helm, young, decisive, sharp as a whip, with no scars to show for it. I remember when she used to walk barefoot through the executive wing on summer breaks, giggling at the vending machine like it was magic. Now she was the one passing sentences. She believed them. Believed I'd faked numbers. That I, of all people, would forge a manifest that passes through 6 verification gates and a customs compliance audit. That I'd risk everything over one contract. She didn't even ask. I took the elevator down alone. When the doors opened, IT was there. Kid couldn't have been older than 25. Probably thought I was a dinosaur. He didn't say anything. Just walked me out like I was nuclear waste. Outside, the sun hit too bright. It always does when your world flips mid-morning. I stood there for a second, not quite ready to move. Looked up at the glass tower I helped build. Literally, financially, operationally. 28 years inside those walls. Now, just a box in my hand and a vague smear of humiliation clinging to my shoes. But I didn't feel rage. Not yet. I felt cold. Like something had been cut from me. Clean. Surgical. No blood. There's a particular silence when a man's usefulness ends. I heard it loud and clear that day, and I took it with me. I didn't get angry. I got curious, because someone wanted me gone, and whoever it was thought I was too old to push back. That was their first mistake. I didn't go to a lawyer, didn't call a journalist. I went home. I live alone. Quiet house, up on a ridge in Edgewater, where the air gets cold by dinner time and the neighbors mind their business. It's the kind of place that forgives silence. The third door in the hallway leads to what most would call a study. I call it my ledger room. Wood-paneled walls, frosted glass, a heavy steel desk with drawers deep enough to hide everything that matters. No cloud storage, no automated backups, just 3 encrypted drives and 6 terabytes of offline data going back to 2012. I opened the drawer, pulled the second drive from its shock mount, and connected it to the old rig, an isolated terminal never once connected to Wi-Fi. It took a minute to boot, long enough for me to remember what Everett Lang used to say when a crisis hit. Don't raise your voice, raise your data. Everett didn't believe in second chances, but he believed in patterns, and he taught me to track them, not just in numbers but in behavior. Procurement delays, vendor invoices, asset movements that didn't match output. Over time, Archwell grew so fast it started leaving footprints in wet cement, so I started keeping a parallel trail. Not because I didn't trust the company, because I didn't trust whoever would come next. I scrolled through transaction logs, flagged shipments, raw capital flows, quiet anomalies that didn't look like much when you saw them alone. But in sequence, they hummed like a warning siren. There it was. Q4 manifest from the Hankook deal. The one Claire pinned on me. Logged, reconciled, and backed up under 3 internal memos. 2 of them were signed off by legal. One by Claire herself, dated 5 days before my termination. Same doc ID, same timestamp. Either she forgot or she hoped I did. I kept digging. Just after my firing, the access logs showed a deletion sweep on the server. 6 files, all tied to the joint venture, were purged at 10:44 a.m., exactly 27 minutes after I walked out the door. Not archived, not migrated, wiped. Whoever did it used an internal override key I hadn't seen since Everett's time, which meant someone high up still had admin-level clearance. Only a few people did. Claire, CFO Marquez, and a board liaison named Carver Dean. Carver. I hadn't thought about him in years, but the second I saw his name again, something shifted in my gut. He was the kind of man who shook your hand with one face and signed your replacement order with the other. Ran PR during our IPO year, then vanished into the boardroom like a shadow melting into a darker one. I remember asking Everett once if he trusted Carver. Everett just laughed and said, "Trust is for church pews and poker nights. You don't survive a war by trusting the man holding your ammo. Carver's name appeared on every approval chain tied to a vendor called Darak Systems. Dubai-based, zero online footprint, shell formation dated only 11 months prior. Supposedly our logistics partner for the Hankook deal. But I'd never seen a single shipment from them cross our docks. I traced the payments, 4 in total. Rounded amounts, no variation, spaced precisely 30 days apart. The routing bank was listed under a firm that hadn't existed 3 years ago. Darak Systems wasn't real, and yet nearly $9.7 million had moved through them in 6 months. That wasn't sloppiness, that was orchestration. Claire hadn't just swallowed a rumor. She'd weaponized it. She needed me out of the way not because I'd done something wrong, but because I was too close to what was actually wrong. The forged manifest was a smokescreen, a keystroke, a spark to light the pile of gasoline someone else had been stacking under the foundation for months. But they didn't know I kept a second trail. Every decision I ever made at Archwell lived in 2 places. The system, and here, in this drive, in this room, on this desk. They thought they deleted me, but I had the receipts. And now I wanted to see how far down the rot went. I didn't need access to their system. I built the damn thing. Back in 2006, Everett asked me to redesign Archwell's internal compliance framework after a subcontractor in Taiwan got caught laundering profit margins through dummy tech licenses. I built it from scratch. Servers, redundancy layers, clearance hierarchies. I wrote the access protocols myself, oversaw the encryption key rotations, hid the maintenance overrides so deep in the architecture, only 3 people ever knew where they lived. 2 of them are dead. The 3rd is me. So no, I didn't need a badge or login to get back in. I needed time, silence, and the right name to call. Her name was Talia Ung, fresh out of Stanford when I met her. Brilliant, soft-spoken, a numbers mind like a scalpel. I trained her under our enterprise risk division before she got poached by the Treasury's financial crimes arm, FinCEN. I hadn't talked to her in years. I sent one message. Need eyes on wire pattern through Maritime Fund, flagged under Darak. You know where to find me. IMS-ER. She replied 6 hours later. Give me 48. I owe you that much. While she did her part, I did mine. I pulled out 2 burner phones from a false drawer under my floorboards. One routed through a prepaid line in Spokane. The other, completely off-grid, manually flashed, untraceable. I used that one to draft the emails. Not threats, not whistleblowing, just nudges, polite professional inquiries. I sent one to CFO Marquez asking for clarification on a duplicate payment ID I'd accidentally received from a vendor back in February. I CC'd Claire. I mentioned Darak Systems casually, like I didn't know any better. I watched the read receipts light up within 5 minutes. 15 minutes later, Marquez's assistant sent a 1-line reply. Could you clarify which invoice you're referencing? Nervous, defensive, already sweating. I sent another to the head of IT. I noticed my credentials are still active on the MirrorPath terminal. Should I shut that down on my end? That was a lie. MirrorPath hadn't been active in 4 years. I'd buried a phantom admin node in its framework, deep enough that even their current security software wouldn't ping it unless they were actively combing through dormant root commands. Which they wouldn't be. They never looked backward. But when someone sees you mention a ghost they didn't know existed, their first instinct is panic. I was counting on it. Then I uploaded 6 files to a server they didn't know I could reach. Under my old credentials, yes, but nested inside a test directory, disguised as a deprecated logistics archive. Each file was named like an internal memo. Each was filled with one simple message, slightly different every time. You were warned about Darak Systems. This is your second chance. Use it or don't. The audit clock already started. No name, no signature, just those lines. The goal wasn't exposure, it was erosion. I didn't want the walls to fall. I wanted them to lean first, to creak, to make everyone inside feel the ceiling shifting above them. When you've worked in a system long enough, you know its weakest point isn't code or money, it's people. They don't know how to sit with silence. They fill it with confession, with blame, with fear. By day 3, Talia sent back the trail. 5 offshore wires moved through 3 holding companies into an account based in Jordan. The routing chain listed Claire Lang as one of 2 beneficial interests, the other, Carver Dean. There it was. The forged manifest wasn't an accident, it was insurance. They used it to cash out, push the blame downstream, and clear the deck before the board could smell smoke. I sent Talia one more note. You didn't see this. I was never here. Her reply came back seconds later. Just 2 words. Stay, ghost. That night, the first leak hit a private equity journal, unsigned, unverifiable, but specific. It questioned Archwell's valuation spike and named Darax Systems as a possible shell. The next morning, a tech reporter picked it up and asked for comment. Claire declined, but she called a board meeting within the hour. Meanwhile, I kept feeding the fire. Nothing direct. Just more data fragments uploaded through the shadow node. Shipment logs with no cargo. Ledger entries missing timestamps. Routing slips that looped back on themselves. It was all true. That was the point. I didn't fabricate anything. I just placed the facts where they could finally be seen. The company started shaking. Not publicly. Not yet. But you could feel it in the PR tone. The internal memos leaked on Reddit. The change in Claire's posture during her last press photo. Chin dipped, jaw clenched, a smile pulled too tight. She didn't know why it was happening. Not yet. But the fraud was circling back. And the people who signed the checks were about to ask where their dividends went. It wasn't revenge. It was redirection. I simply turned their fraud back toward the flame and let it catch fire. By the time the quarterly report hit the wire, their hands were already covered in ink and gasoline. The numbers didn't add up. That was the first crack. Revenue projections had ballooned on paper, pushed upward by phantom vendors, and front-loaded contracts that never closed. The moment analysts compared Q2 projections to cash flow disclosures, the math betrayed them. You can fake signatures, you can fake timestamps, but money always leaves footprints. By Friday morning, Archwell's stock dropped 9 points. By Monday, 14. 2 board members jumped ship the moment the media caught wind. One issued a vague statement about health concerns. The other just disappeared, scrubbed his LinkedIn, pulled his press headshot, even bailed on a keynote at the logistics summit in D.C. That was when I knew the real panic had started. Claire, to her credit, tried to hold the wheel. I watched her press briefing from my kitchen table, laptop propped against a bowl of untouched cereal. She wore her hair down, dark suit, eyes sharp, voice steady. Said the right things. Internal review, full cooperation, legacy system discrepancies. But her fingers tapped the podium twice when she said, discrepancies. A tell. Same one her father had when he was bluffing. They were trying to plug a hole in the hull with thumbtacks, because every time she offered an explanation, another detail slipped out. See? The leaks weren't random. They were sequenced, purposeful, like blood drops on a white tile floor, each leading a little closer to the wound. And I'd saved the deepest cut for last. Darax Systems wasn't just a shell. It was tied, through 5 layers of fake companies and nominee directors, to a discretionary trust registered in the British Virgin Islands. The primary beneficiary? Claire Everett Lang. I didn't find that one on my own. That was Talia's work. She found the trust link buried in a banking application tied to a Dubai clearinghouse. One of the director's signatures matched a clerk who'd once worked for Lang Capital Holdings, Everett's personal fund, before he died. Claire didn't just authorize the direct payments. She benefited from them. I sat there, staring at the screen, the hard truth pulsing like a vein under glass. She hadn't just believed the lie. She was the lie. So I reached into the archive one last time. Buried in an old Outlook export from 2020 was an email string between Claire, Carver Dean, and the CFO. Subject line: Korean JVA adjustments. One line stood out. Claire had typed it herself. Let's just shape the numbers to match until the real funding lands. Dad always said optics drive confidence. Shape the numbers, match the funding, drive confidence. It was boardroom code for lie now, fix it later. I repackaged the thread, removed headers, cleaned metadata, sent it to 3 journalists, each one hungry, each one desperate to break something bigger than a tech pivot story. I didn't sign it, just dropped a note. She lied. Start here. 2 days later, the piece hit. Front page, Financial Times. Then Reuters picked it up. Then a dozen others. The trust, the emails, the offshore account numbers. By noon, Archwell shares froze at $17.83, less than half their value 3 weeks earlier. Trading was suspended by 3 p.m. The SEC stepped in that evening. DOJ sent a request for compliance documentation the next morning. And by Thursday, government investigators walked through the front doors of Archwell HQ with sealed warrants and 2 forensic accountants in tow. I watched it all from my window. Quiet. Still. Not a flicker of satisfaction. Not yet. Claire was photographed crying in a stairwell that afternoon. A junior analyst caught the shot through a glass panel, mascara smeared, phone clenched in her fist, a look in her eyes like the walls had turned to liquid. It went viral, within hours. From Queen to Collapse, one blog titled it. I didn't smile. This wasn't theater. It wasn't vengeance. It was just gravity doing its job. When you build your throne on fake numbers and forged vendors, all it takes is one unaccounted line item to rip the floor out from beneath you. They called it fraud, dereliction, breach of fiduciary duty. I called it inevitable. Archwell became a case study within 10 days. Clients pulled out, partners distanced. Claire hasn't spoken publicly since. No apology, no retraction, no attempt to shift blame. Maybe she finally understood what it felt like to be silenced without a question. She thought she buried me with a rumor. I buried her with the truth. No headlines, no lawsuit, no memoir. I didn't want applause. I wanted stillness. I wanted quiet. The diner off Route 9 still had that sour coffee smell soaked into the booths, like someone had tried to clean the air back in '82 and just gave up. I sat in the corner, the one facing the door, same as always. Local news flickered on the mounted screen near the pie display, volume low, captions rolling across the bottom like whispers. Archwell Group, to begin formal dismantling following federal indictments. A photo of the building flashed, empty lobby, revolving doors still spinning under fluorescent lights. Then her face. Claire Lang, tired, washed out, cheekbones sharper than I remembered. Behind her, the camera caught the blur of agents in navy jackets, one of them holding a sealed evidence box marked confidential. Lang to face multiple counts of securities, fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. They used the word conspiracy, like it was currency, like it hadn't been earned in silence, traded in long hours, and sealed rooms. She didn't say a word as they led her through the back garage of the courthouse, just like I hadn't, the day she fired me. Carver was already gone, disappeared the moment the subpoenas landed. Word is, He flew out of Zurich using a diplomatic pass connected to a consulting role in the Emirates. A final escape act from a man who never left a print. But Talia flagged his exit logs. The Bureau will find him eventually. That's not my concern anymore. I stirred my coffee and watched a couple across the booth argue about toast. Life moved on, like it always does. When I left Archwell, they offered me the usual severance, NDAs, non-disparagement clauses, a generic settlement drafted by someone who thought I'd care about a payout. I never signed, never answered the follow-ups, just walked away. Instead, I mailed one envelope. No return address, no fingerprints, just the original signed approval memo, one internal transfer record, and a handwritten note. You missed this. I sent it to the Office of Regulatory Affairs. It was enough to tip the scale. The rest, the files, the backups, the archive drives, I burned, one by one, in a rusted barrel behind the shed of a cabin I bought 6 years ago and never told anyone about. Oregon forest. Nearest neighbors a mile off. Cell reception dies halfway up the access road. Perfect. No phone, no email, just a shortwave receiver for weather alerts and a knife I keep sharp out of habit. There's a generator, a wood stove, and a view that doesn't ask for anything. On clear nights, you can see all the way across the valley to where the mountains knife into the sky. That's where I am now. I don't read the articles. I don't track the fallout. The reporters are doing their job. The government will do theirs. Archwell will be carved up, piece by piece, auctioned off like failed empires always are. And me? I'm the part they'll never find. Sometimes I think about those last few days in the building, how quiet everything was beneath the noise. The way Claire looked when she handed me that red folder, like she couldn't quite believe she had the authority. The silence in the hallway as I carried my box past people I'd bled with. I gave them everything. 28 years. Every night, every compromise, every smart move that made other people look like geniuses. And in the end, they threw me out on a whisper. But they forgot what Everett once told me, what I never stopped believing. Loyalty is a currency, and when the books get cooked, the man holding the cleanest ledger decides when the lights go out. They handed me the match. I didn't rebuild. I didn't start over. There's nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. I don't want a new title. I don't want another corner office. That chapter ended the second Claire chose to believe a forged number over a man who spent half his life protecting her father's legacy. She made her bed. Now the whole building's ash. Out here, there's no buzz of fluorescent lights, no stock alerts, just wind and pine, and the occasional rustle of deer cutting through underbrush. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't knock or introduce itself. It just arrives when the war ends and no one's left to question who started it. Some nights I write in a ledger, not about work, not about her, not about any of it. Just names I remember. Moments that mattered. People who showed up when they didn't have to. It's my own way of keeping the ghosts in order. Then I fold the page, tear it, and let it burn in the stove, one by one, until they're just smoke. I don't need to be remembered. I just need to stay gone. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just walks away while the building burns.